Hey everybody, welcome back to the GOAZCATS.com football preview show. There's only a few more of these left. We're getting towards the end of the season, the last month of the season. This is senior editor of GOAZCATS.com, Matt Moreno, joined by Troy Hutchison, staff writer at GOAZCATS.com, as always. And, this week, obviously should be the last ranked opponent for Arizona this season. UCLA, it's been kind of building up to this point. This is one of those games I think every year Arizona fans feel like they can be in, and for a good reason. These games have tended to be pretty close over the years. And so going in different directions right now. Both of these teams, UCLA is obviously trying to hold on to any hope it has of trying to sneak into the college football playoff. A lot has to go right for the Bruins to have that happen. I don't even know if it's very feasible at this point, but they're still playing for a Pac-12 title and to at least get into that championship game. And they have a big one coming up against USC. Feels like a trap game. I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but it feels like a potentially, it's a trap. Potentially, one of those games that you could see a team like UCLA overlooking Arizona. But before we get to this week's game, what happened last week, Troy? Man, I know you've been really high on Utah throughout the season. They've kind of stumbled a couple times, but I don't know that anybody expected that game to play out like it did. Maybe the score, but to see what side of the ball had the issues and how consistent those issues were throughout the game, it feels like a little bit of an anomaly where it feels like that's maybe just a one-off. But what did you see? Is that a sign of bad things with this offense, or what was your takeaway from what happened last week in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, first of all, little Dennis Green here. They are who we thought they were. That's what Utah is. Running the football. They don't turn over the ball very much. I know they had 2 turnovers, but solid team, and they are who we thought they were going into that game. For Arizona, I mean, man, that was the worst offensive performance, maybe in Jedd Fisch's tenure here in Tucson. I know last season there weren't a lot of great performances, but from the get-go, you just felt like Arizona had no shot in that game. First play of the game, they who was it? It was Tanner McLaughlin was wide open down the middle of the seam, and Jaden just missed him, overthrew him. I know Tanner should have caught the ball, but he hit him high, incomplete a pass, and you're like, oh, this isn't going good. On that same drive, they finally get things going, and Delora misses the handoff to Wiley, and it's a fumble and turnover. Arizona, Utah scores, and you're in the hole. On the night, Arizona had 7 fumbles and lost 4 of them. And a lot of that was on Jaden Delora. I mean, he was just very sloppy with the football. I know Cowan had the big fumble, the punt that really killed Arizona, I think, for that game. And then a fumble later on in the game as well. But just the sloppiness with the football that we've seen pretty much all season kind of reared its ugly head against Utah. At the beginning of the year, it was interceptions against Mississippi State, Cal. Oregon had a couple interceptions as well, and they came in bunches. But to have 7 fumbles and lose 4 of them, I just think it shows a lack of protecting the football from Jaden Delora, and that's the one hiccup in his game is he just doesn't protect the football very well, and you saw it rear its ugly head against Utah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they were battling some difficult conditions at times during that game. The rain was coming down pretty hard, for portions of that game. But I don't know that you can put that solely on just the weather because the team on the other side has to play in that as well. And maybe they're more conditioned to play in that. But what's your thoughts, Troy?
Well, no, I mean, not only that, but Jaden played in the rain. I mean, he's played in that before at Washington State. So you thought if you would think going into this game, who's the one guy that's going to play well in this weather? It was probably Jaden because he's done that before at Washington State. He did that against Arizona when they went up in that fog game, that weird kind of like snowy fog game. So you thought, okay, he's not going to perform horribly against Utah. And it probably was his worst performance of his career.
So kind of back to my original point, do you think that's a sign of bad things to come or that things are not going well? Or is it just, in your mind, one of those games, it was just an anomaly? It's just kind of what happened and they're going to be able to kind of get back to form against UCLA?
I think it's an anomaly because it is fumbles. If this was interceptions, I think he has some concerns because that's what Jaden has done throughout his career is throw picks. And when he does, it comes in bunches. but he's shown the ability to overcome that. And fumbling the football, I mean, you're not going to play in that type of weather again the rest of the season. Yeah, Washington stayed at home, Arizona stayed at home. Even if it was in Tempe, you're not going to get that kind of weather. So I don't think you're going to see that out of Arizona again. But the one thing that keeps on coming up is just questionable decision making, which you are going to see again, I feel, at times. 4th and 20, and you go for it, but then you punt it on 4th and 5. Just some really interesting decisions. We've seen Jed Fish develop as a play caller, but clearly some things that they still need to get ironed out.
Talking about, I mean, usually we've led these, at least recently, with the defense, and oh man, the defense played so poorly, or this, how do they fix the defense, all those things. But the defense felt like maybe it made some progress last week. They give up 45 points, but it felt like there was kind of steps in the right direction. I mean, what was your take on that side of the ball?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, overall they gave up 45 points, but you could really say that 21 to maybe even 28 of those points were because of the lack of offense or the offense shooting themselves in the foot. So defensively, I thought Arizona played fairly well. Yes, they gave up rushing yards, but you're going to do that when you're on the field so long and put into bad predicaments. Um, they created 2 fumbles, had the goal line stand, which I thought Utah's running back was down. They didn't review the play, which was kind of shocking. But you get the fumble there and you stop them there. And then they get the fumble on Utah's tight end as Utah's driving. They gave their offense an opportunity to get back into the game and make it interesting. And the offense just didn't capitalize. I mean, I felt, walking away from that game, and similar to the USC game, there was a lot of positives on the defensive side of the football. I know a lot of fans were complaining about it on message boards and on Twitter, but overall, I think you had to feel good about the defense's performance the last several weeks.
So looking ahead to this UCLA game, both teams dealing with some uncertainty about key players. For UCLA, it's Zach Charbonnet, their running back, star running back, capable of putting up, it feels like, 200 rushing yards a game with ease. Obviously would be of note if he can't go. We'll hopefully hear about that a little bit later in the show when we have a guest on to give us his take on the UCLA side. But Jacob Cowing, uncertainty. Arizona doesn't necessarily like to talk about injuries too much. Jed will, address it all, but what do you think the situation is there? Do you expect him to play? Do you think he's going to play? And if not, is Kevin Green kind of the next man up, or how is this going to play out for Arizona if Jacob Cowing isn't able to go? And do you think it's serious enough that he's not going to be able to play this week?
Yeah, I think Jed has shown a pattern in terms of if a guy's going to go and a guy's not going to go. Usually at the beginning of the week, if you ask him about an injured player, he says, oh, we think he's going in the right direction, but it'll be a game time decision, but we're leaning towards him going in the right direction. That's more the positive side. And then you have the negative side, which you said with Cowing, is we're going to have to evaluate him later in the week, which generally means he's not going to play. I don't think Jacob's going to be able to go in this game. We'll find out today with Jed Fish's press conference. But if he is unable to go, yeah, it's Kevin Green that's going to be filling that role for him. Maybe even a little bit of Anthony Simpson as well. I think you could see him step in there. They've used him in the slot area and on the outside. I think Kevin Green, though, is more than capable of taking over that role. Very good player. I think he would be a starter on most teams in the Pac-12. I mean, he is that talented of a player and kind of fit in seamlessly during spring and training camp when he filled in for Jacob throughout a couple of snaps and stuff like that. But if he's unable to go, if Cowing's unable to go, expect a ton of targets for Dorian Senior and T-Mac. But not only that, Tanner McLaughlin as well, with those underneath routes. I think you're going to see the tight end used a lot in this game, but if Cowing isn't able to go, keep an eye on those guys.
And we'll get filled in more on the UCLA side here soon, but in the next segment that we have coming up. But I want to get your take on just, first, what are some things that you're going to be keeping an eye on this week? Obviously, we've talked about one thing they can't do with the fumbles, but, maybe outside of that, or you can include that as well. But what are some things you're going to have your eye on this week for Arizona that you think need to go right, or just things that are going to be part of the equation if they can pull off a win this weekend?
Yeah, number one is you can't shoot yourself in the foot like you did against Utah. Not only just fumbling the ball, but you can't have multiple turnovers in this game. I think you can survive one turnover. Let's say, Jaden throws the seam route that gets picked off, doesn't see the high safety. I think you're able to overcome that. And they kind of did against USC, and he was able to bounce back from that pick. So I think one turnover, you're fine. You can't have a game with multiple turnovers and giving this Bruins offense multiple opportunities to flip the field, because that's not going to result in anything good for Arizona. Number two is you got to make it third and manageable for your offense. You can't get in third and long situations. Arizona's kind of been up and down in third down conversions this season as an offense. We see them be really good at times and then really bad at other times. If you could get in that 3rd and 5 and below for Jaden DeLore in the offense, you're going to see Arizona succeed, because then they're going to be able to spread the defense out and hurt them many different ways. And then lastly, get your defense off the field. So third down defensively for Arizona have been a problem this season. We saw it against the USC in the first half, where I think the Trojans went 9 for 10, 9 of 11 on third down conversions. That's just way too high of a clip. Utah was starting to convert some hard third downs as well. You need to be able to get the defense off the field, make it 3rd and 8 or more. If it's 3rd and short, it's going to be Charbonnet, and they're going to run all over you if he's able to go. So just try to get off the field. I think that's the biggest thing. You need to be able to get off the field and get your offense back on the field.
Cool. And in terms of just maybe some players you're going to keep an eye on, maybe Kevin Green is one of them. We'll know it's come Saturday. But who are some key players that you're going to be watching, regardless of whoever is on the field, off the field, whatever, but players that are going to be important to what Arizona wants to do this Saturday?
Yeah, I think defensively, I think you have to look at that side of the ball because of how much of a high-powered offense UCLA is. And the two guys defensively I think Arizona needs to have a big game are Hunter Echols and Jacob Manu. Hunter Echols, because UCLA is going to run a lot of RPO, a lot of run pass options on you. You're going to see a lot of, decisions by Dorian to Charbonnet. Rather, they're going to keep the ball or take the ball. And that's going to put Hunter Echols and Jalen Harris on an island, and they got to make that decision and make the right one every time, or else they're going to get burned. So I think you got to keep an eye on both of those guys. And then Jacob Manu, I think he's going to be the spy for Dorian in this game, because we saw Caleb Colby Cage with that role early in the season. He hasn't played very much recently, and Jacob's kind of come on strong. He's starting to put together some really good games, and you're seeing him develop as a linebacker. And I don't think Jerry Roberts has the speed to go get Dorian Thompson-Robinson on the outside, but I think Jacob does. I think he has sneaky speed that people don't expect, and this could be a big game for him as a statement game, kind of like nobody recruited me outside of Arizona. I came from Southern California. You guys didn't even look at me, and this is why you should have. So I look at him in this game. Lastly, offensively, it's T-Mac time. He's kind of been quiet over the last several weeks. He had the touchdown against Utah, but statistically didn't have some great games against USC or Utah. I feel like this is one of those games where T-Mac can shine and kind of go over the top against a UCLA secondary that's been struggling. I think Arizona's going to hurt them underneath a couple times, but they're going to go long, and I think T-Mac will be there, and I expect them to have a huge game.
Well, we will see how it plays out. Coming up next for everybody, for all of our viewers here, we have a special guest. If you're a true GOAZCATS.com fan, if you've been with us for a while, if you've slogged through a lot of what has happened over the last decade, you remember Tracy McDannald from Bruin Blitz, staff writer, was once at GOAZCATS.com, was once my boss, now covering UCLA, but we brought him in to give us some insight into this weekend's game. Obviously, two programs in different places right now. Maybe that's why Tracy left, just to, go cover UCLA. But no, but obviously a lot going on this week for everybody with basketball as well. But at UCLA on campus, obviously football generating a little bit of buzz. I know Arizona, the talk has been like, well, basketball season's here. It's kind of that usual topic of basketball season's arrived. You can start to maybe forget a little bit about what's going on football. UCLA is still hanging on. They love basketball over there as well in LA, but football doing well. Tracy, what can you tell us about just the course of this season, how things have played out? I think a lot of people expected UCLA to be pretty good, but what can you tell us about just how the season has lined up with maybe some of the expectations out in Westwood?
Yeah, I mean, as far as expectations go, I think because they had such a soft non-conference and so many games at home, I think a double-digit win season wasn't something that's all that surprising. I personally had them 10 wins before the year, and they could easily exceed that. I think where they started to really gain some a little bit more trust with the public was beating Utah. I think because that again, that non-conference schedule, you're not going to impress anybody beating South Alabama, and even then the South Alabama game, they win by 1 point, and people are like, okay, you know there are the issues that people thought that were going to come up. Those issues mostly being defensively, and then some of their offensive line. But then once conference play hit, their offensive line shaped up. Their defense has done enough to keep them in games. So they've definitely, I'd say, exceeded expectations while still being on that track for being, on track for an upper tier Pac-12 bowl game.
Chip's been in a good mood throughout the season. I mean, do you get a sense? The only thing that maybe hasn't, that he's been a little bit kind of irked about, maybe outside of injuries, which is every coach, has been the late start times, which you have another one this week. What's it been like, going through a season? It feels like we've all kind of gotten to know the little bit of a I don't know, not angry Chip, but just a little bit irked at kind of a little bit of everything. But it just hasn't been that way this season. He's been in a good mood for the most part. He's joking with, you guys in the media, but what's been your take on just his overall kind of attitude? Is it just because they're winning and now are kind of one of those teams that's in at least the college football playoff conversation a little bit?
Yeah, I think winning does help a lot. Then, when you are bringing up some of the issues, whether it be the defense here and there or whatever, he's not, as miffed, and he's not going to shoot back as strong a response. But yeah, he's definitely mellowed out a little bit, I think, as like maybe the first 3 weeks of the season, it was pretty standard stuff. And then for whatever reason, once conference play hit, it's just been I stopped short of saying, a giddy Chip Kelly, but it's definitely been a more relaxed Chip Kelly than, because I've talked to some of the local beat writers who've covered the team much longer than I have. And, they're all very surprised by it. So, yeah, I think winning does help a lot.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say a giddy Chip Kelly would be scary. I don't think that he ever want to say giddy Chip. There's something wrong if he's giddy, because that's not his personality. But go ahead, Troy.
No, I was going to say, what's been the biggest difference for UCLA from the South Alabama game until now? Because, like you said, defensively, they had a lot of issues in that game. They didn't look like they do now. And now it seems like a completely different team since that start.
I think one thing with this team that's been pretty good is focus. It's very cliche. I remember when he started, they started bringing it up, this whole nameless, faceless opponent approach. And I'm like, all right, a lot of teams say that, but they've really stuck to that. They've been really good about eliminating, and forgetting about what happened the previous week, and then keeping the focus on the current week. So right after that, South Alabama game, again, they have a very easy start in the Pac-12 play with Colorado. So, Colorado is going to be a game for a lot of people to get right. And then from there, they've just really stuck to it. Even when you go back, I think what really showed it was losing at Oregon, the way their defense played and couldn't get a stop. Then again, a lot of people aren't stopping Oregon unless you're Georgia. But, the way they bounced back and held that same philosophy, they've really bought in. They've got a ton of seniors, 19 players are graduate students. So, they're definitely a very mature group that can handle any types of adversity that can come up throughout a season.
So now we'll talk about, I don't want to say the elephant in the room, but it's been the topic of the week when you're winning games and there's not necessarily much different from game to game for UCLA. When you sit out one of your star players for a second game and everyone says, we just saw him practicing throughout the week, it becomes odd. You kind of worked through that earlier in the season, but what's going on with Zach Charbonnet? Is he going to play? Because I know every Arizona fan thinks if a guy's injured, Arizona game shows up and suddenly he's ready to go. He's healthy again, and he's going to run for 400 yards. I mean, what's the deal with Zach Charbonnet and maybe the rest of the running back group as well? Because I know there's been maybe a couple guys who have been withheld from practice this week.
Yeah. So with Charbonnet, it's interesting because this has happened before. I want to say the second game of the year, that would have been Alabama State, I believe. Same thing, practice throughout the week. I believe he even spoke to us that week. And then just inexplicably didn't play. Dorian was pulled early in that game because he took a hit. And, it was very, very odd, but then again, we also looked at it, non-conference, they're not going to push it. And I know very early, I want to say either back to the spring or at the start of fall camp, Sean Foster made it a point to say, they're not going to run Zach Charbonnet into the ground. So, you take that into account. And then right before the Arizona State week, I definitely remember we got Zach Charbonnet. It was either a Tuesday or a Wednesday to speak with us. He was just coming off a big game against Stanford. He's played with bandages before, one on his left arm and one around his left leg. So we never really made too much of that. And then, Arizona State game comes around. I didn't personally travel for the game, but I know people said they saw him warm up. And then all of a sudden he's not in there. I think with Chip, especially some of my own personal experiences, some of the home games, you'll see a guy who, is a little bit banged up. He'll go through warm-ups, but, we're off the field, at most we're only allowed to stay on the field like 10 minutes prior to kickoff or something like that. And then we just don't know if he's going to play or not. So then once the camera started going in on Charbonnet, I was like, okay, it's going to be one of those situations. He's just not going to come in. Now going into this week, again, saw him out there practicing Tuesday. Same thing happened Wednesday. As far as some of his backups, Keegan Jones was out earlier in the week. He was back by Wednesday. Some of the other questions we maybe still have, Casimir Allen, a slot receiver who's also a former running back and had the big game against Arizona State with Charbonnet out. He was, as of Tuesday, held off to the side, just doing some strength and conditioning stuff. So it's fair to say his status is a little bit maybe up in the air. But it seems like they're a little bit healthier to end this week. They don't do their final evaluations until Friday. And then, like I said, game day, I think it's fair to say it's a game time type of thing with anybody that's been dinged up in that running back room.
So what's your take on, what needs to go right for UCLA? Obviously, you look at the record, you look at the talent overall. There's a reason why this game is, I think, close to a 3 touchdown, point spread. One of the things we like to do every week is, just talk about, some of the keys to the game for Arizona. Before we get to that with Troy, what's maybe some of the keys to UCLA for this game that, they think, or that they've been talking about that they want to accomplish to pull out a win and not have, one of those trap games or an upset before they get to, their big game against USC?
Offensively for UCLA, it's the same as it's always been. Run, and run some more. I mean, they've got, they showed in that Arizona State game that they've got plenty of depth, even if they are missing a player or two. And like you said, an opponent like Arizona who's not great with against the run, it's almost a good thing that the schedule lined up this way for them if they are still dealing with some nicks here and there. So as long as they do that, and they've also done a very good job this season of not turning the ball over. And that's why I think, those two things have really helped cover up some of the things they've struggled with defensively, particularly against the pass. So, as long as their offense is clicking, then the defense again becomes a non-issue. For Arizona, for UCLA defensively, it probably would be nice if their pass defense did improve though and show up a little bit. When they're going right, their pass rush is, getting home to the quarterback and they're helping out some of the defensive backs, because some of those defensive backs, Devin Kirkwood, John Humphrey, they're both pretty young. Kirkwood's only a sophomore, his first year starting. Humphrey didn't start last year. They've got some experience in the safeties with Mo Osling III and Stephen Blaylock back there. So there is some insurance there. But, if they can generate a pass rush, especially against, say, Arizona team that really loves to throw the ball and has, especially receiving wise, they've got some pretty good targets out there. Then it's almost similar to the Washington game, I would say, and the number of receiving threats they had. If they can duplicate that sort of plan that they had, then I think all things should be good from a UCLA standpoint.
And what are those areas in the passing game that they've had trouble in? Is it like down the seams or on the outside? Like, is there a specific area, or is it just all over the field for them?
Lately, going back to the Arizona State game, Chip Kelly made it a point to say the passes on checkdowns were an issue, throws underneath. And then as far as just the defense in general, it's been gang tackling. They didn't get enough people to the ball against Arizona State. I believe they gave up 26 second half points in that game, got a lead that was once 35-10 down into a 6-point lead. So again, I always hesitate with the Pac-12 because it's a league that obviously has cannibalized itself over the years when you're talking about some of the top teams. So I know people like to throw around the term trap game, and this can very much be one if that defense doesn't show up or if the offense doesn't click early.
In terms of players to watch, obviously there's the laundry list of guys that we talked about that have been in and out this week, but obviously DTR is going to be a huge part of whatever they do this weekend, whether it is in the passing game or it is with his feet. You can maybe include him in this as well, but who are some players, maybe guys that just casual Arizona fan or somebody who just doesn't watch UCLA, every week. Who are some of those guys that are going to be key to this game that maybe you're going to have your eye on, or that Arizona fans should know about that could make an impact on this game?
If we're talking strictly offensively, that receiving core had a lot of questions coming into the season. They brought in Jake Bobo from Duke, but beyond that, there were a lot of questions of how else it was going to pan out. One thing that they've shown is even if some of the other receivers have limited targets, they make those limited targets count. I think the biggest example of that was the Utah game. Logan Loya had a 70-yard touchdown. I mean, they've got those kind of explosive guys who maybe they're only going to get thrown the ball 2 or 3 times, but they make those 2 or 3 catches that they do get. They really make them count, and they turn them into 20, 30, 40-yard gains and sometimes more. So I think with UCLA, if you're Arizona and you're that Arizona defense, you kind of have to be aware that they have a number of playmakers outside of their stars like Charbonnet and DTR, and even to an extent Kaz Allen, if you want to throw him in because of the big game he had. There is some depth there in that receiving core that if you're not careful with them, they could break off a big game.
You got anything else, Troy, before we get to Tracy's prediction here?
Yeah, defensively, who would you say is the leader on the team for UCLA?
I think you start in the middle with their middle linebacker, Darius Moisau. It's kind of weird when you're talking about a leader on a team where he is a transfer. He came in from Hawaii. They've got a load of transfers. I mean, they really had some success with the transfer portal. When you think about Leatu Latu coming over from Washington, Gabriel and Grayson Murphy coming over from North Texas, they've all been impact transfers. But Muasau's the guy that kind of holds it all together. And then if you're going to go in the secondary, Stephen Blaylock is the guy that, if those corners do struggle, himself, Mo Osling III, that veteran group they have in the safeties, they're going to have to really, show up and make sure things don't get too crazy against Arizona and that passing offense.
I know one thing we can never complain about, or any of us who pay attention to Arizona or like try to cover Arizona, the names. If you look at UCLA's list of their roster, some of those names, man, I don't know how you guys do it. Coach Chad is just Coach Chad for a reason.
Yeah, no.
There's some names. So appreciate you hitting on all those. But let's get to the prediction for the week. I'll be there in LA. You'll be there. I think Arizona will be decently represented. There's a really strong alumni base in the LA area. It's a more fun game than it has been in past years when both teams are kind of just in kind of middling and just kind of fighting to make a bowl game. I think Arizona fans probably see this as an opportunity to beat a ranked team and knock them out of the college football playoff picture for good. Although UCLA, I think, needs some help. Need to have a big game against USC, but what's your prediction for this weekend? How do you think it's going to play out? Obviously, as I mentioned, the point spread close to 3 touchdowns in favor of the Bruins. I think 77 points we said before this started overall for the over-under. It's a lot of points. How do you see things playing out on Saturday?
Offensively, I think UCLA is going to be fine. I'm hesitant when you talk about, point spreads and things like that, especially like I said before with the Pac-12. It just feels like one of those games that's going to maybe be closer than people expect. Just because, like I said, Arizona does have some legit targets out there that could easily give UCLA pass defense some issues. If UCLA does not get out to a strong start like they have most of these games this year and create that cushion, then I think you're going to see a shootout. I'm thinking somewhere in the range of 48-41 maybe. I think it could, because they haven't really had a hairy game besides that South Alabama game. I mean, the Oregon game, I don't think anybody was surprised with how that one turned out. But at home, since that South Alabama game, they haven't really been challenged. And I'm, when your pass defense has shown some issues before, there's never comfort, I guess, is the word. There's no sense in believing just yet that if they didn't get it right the first 9 games of the season, that they're just going to all of a sudden turn it on. So I think I'm going to give a little bit more respect to Arizona than maybe some of the public would in that respect. But like I said, I think it's going to be a shootout somewhere in the 48-41 type of range. That's
your GOAZCATS roots showing out, Tracy. No. All right, we'll get to our predictions now. Troy, what do you see in this week? What do you think? We already talked about, some of the things earlier in the show that we expected to see from Arizona this week, but how do you see it playing out? I know we've talked about this because we talked about this before we shot the show earlier in the week. You were starting to flip flop, and I think I talked you back to go back the other way because you, from the very beginning, when the season started, you were high on Arizona winning this game, and then in the last week, you were kind of getting hesitant about that especially after the way they played last week against Utah. But where are you at now? I'm forcing you to make a prediction. What do you see happening this Saturday?
Yeah, no, at the beginning of the season, I was fairly confident Arizona was going to upset UCLA. I didn't have a lot of faith in the Bruins throughout this season, and they keep on winning. Still not highly impressed. But Jacob Cowing's status is up in the air, and that's a huge loss for Arizona if he's unable to go, even though they have Kevin Green behind him. But I got to stick to what I believe. And I do believe Arizona is going to get one of these games. I think they get this one. 38-31, a little bit lower scoring. Both defenses make a couple plays that they shouldn't. But I think eventually the passing game of Arizona is too much for UCLA to handle. Even without Jacob Cowing, I think Arizona has the best receiving corps in this conference. Guys top to bottom, just really impressive. You've seen Tanner McLaughlin come on strong lately. But I think Arizona wins this one 38-31. And the defense comes up with 2 turnovers in this game.
You always got to get that specific one in there. At least you didn't say who it was. Usually it's like Jackson Turner in the 3rd quarter interception. I don't know how many times you've hit on those. We'll have to go back and check, but appreciate you sticking to just 2 turnovers. For me, I'm going to go with what you were thinking earlier in the week. Last week's game, I think, changes some things for me with Arizona. I mean, history, as Tracy knows, and we've covered a lot of these, tells us Arizona wins a game like this. For no reason at all. Just no reason at all. They win a game like this. I think everybody who's an Arizona fan watching the show knows that they win games like this for no reason at all. There's no rhyme or reason to why it happens. It just does. I think maybe you look at the USC game as that possibility. I think people looked at, the Oregon game and said maybe that's a possibility. Maybe even last week. But I just think seeing that it was the offense and seeing how much they struggled. I know the elements were in play. Not going to have that this week, but it wasn't good, and it was kind of going in the wrong direction. And so I probably would have picked, I don't know if I would have picked Arizona to win this game, but I think I would have picked it to be a little bit closer than what I'm going to pick it. Just because last week, I think that's a little bit more indicative of something, I don't want to say more serious, but I just don't think it's a blip on the screen and just an anomaly. I think there's some things wrong still with this team that need to get corrected as they go into the offseason. And you mentioned Jacob Cowing. If he doesn't play, I think that changes things dramatically. I like Kevin Green. He hasn't played a ton this season. He hasn't been put in the spotlight as much as he will be if he has to play in this game. Obviously, there's some other elements, but I think UCLA. I think Charbonnet is going to play. I think he just feels like that. I don't know that they give him 2 weeks off, especially with Chip trying to make a case for, they need more exposure. He's talked about that a lot, a late game. He's brought that up, I think, the last 2 weeks, right, Tracy?
Yeah, he's definitely made it a point. And it's, again, one of those things that people don't really expect out of a guy who's been so team-oriented to shed a light on that. But, yeah, 3 straight 7:30 p.m. games, I think that'll drive anybody a little bit crazy.
As we all know, as we got to know with Rich Rod, he doesn't like those late starts. But yeah, I just think I think Charbonnet will play. I think it's just too much. I think they line up with what Arizona doesn't do well. So all that is to say, I have UCLA winning 45-27. I think Arizona's offense looks a little bit better, but I just think I think people don't give UCLA's offense enough credit. 2 chips, credit. They're a really good offense. I mean, they can put up a lot of yards. They can put up points. I just think they're going to be too much for Arizona. I think it feels too much like one of those games where Arizona's going to get a win that it doesn't happen. So we'll see. I mean, they usually do play close, but I don't see it this week. And then that'll take, Arizona out of bowl eligibility, and they can kind of start to get ready for next season. Maybe you see them play some younger players, the next few games, but I don't see it this week, but that's what we all picked this week. We appreciate Tracy for stopping by. It was good to see you again, Tracy. I'm sure some of the GOAZCATS fans, we've had some longtime people on those message boards that I'm sure remember you as well. So we appreciate you stopping by. That is Tracy McDannald from Bruin Blitz. Make sure to check out all his coverage this week and this weekend. Anything else to add, Troy, before we get off of here?
No, just we'll see how this game goes. I agree with you. It could turn into a blowout.
Yeah. Don't change it now, Troy. No, don't change
I'm not changing it. I'm not changing it, but if it's not close, I do think it's going to be a blowout. And not in a positive way.
Listen, we appreciate everybody listening. That's it for this week's show, and we'll catch you guys next time.